Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Marissa Kozlov, and it's great to have you with us for today's eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and MarTech. Today, we are going to unpack the trends that will define retail in 2024. And I am thrilled to welcome back Ethan Chernofsky, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Placer.ai. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, Marissa. Great to see you.
So good to see you again. And we are so happy to have all of you with us in our audience. So just a quick reminder that Ethan is going to be taking your questions live in the second half of the show. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask him, just use the chat window to submit any questions, and we will do our very best to get to as many of those as we can. So keep them coming. All right, I am really looking forward to our conversation today, Ethan. Over to you to get started.
Thank you so much. So, like we always do, we just want to give a quick introduction to kind of who Placer is, what informs our perspective, and like understanding what it is that we do and do not see. So, Placer is a location data company. What that means, very, very simply, people vote with their feet. We show you how they vote across the United States every single day. We do that by observing a panel of tens of millions of devices. And very critically, this is all de-identified aggregate data. So we are GDPR and CCPA compliant. We then analyze that data with machine learning and AI algorithms and present it in a wealth of different reports in our platform on everything from visits, visit frequency, true trade areas, the customer journey, and a whole lot more. And with that, I think it's time to dive in.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So first, we're going to talk about some of the key players in the market that have been really, really dominant. And we know that there have been challenges in retail this past year in 2023, but there's also been segments like athleisure and beauty that have performed really well. So what can we learn from their success? And do you think that will continue in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think it's such an important starting point because I do think 2023 was a challenging year. So in a lot of segments, we saw minor visit declines, flat visits, slight increases. And we need to remember that it's been a very difficult period, right? So we have this extended period of economic headwinds, but even more than that, we have economic uncertainty. So when we talk about uncertainty, what it means is not just that, hey, I'm feeling an economic pressure today, it's that I'm not certain that that economic pressure is going to dissipate in a month from now. And that has a huge impact on how I spend, how much I'm willing to spend, when I'll spend, and how different promotions and activities are going to impact me and my thought process. What I do think there is important to learn from top performers, and again, think beauty and wellness, price, athleisure, discounted dollar, is the first piece is that they have a very clear brand promise. Everyone understands exactly what to expect from these brands. They understand what they should be getting from them. And these brands are able to deliver on that promise. And it's not just the products, it's the retail experience too. So when I walk into an Ulta or when I walk into a Sephora, I have an expectation of what I'm going to get, and it very often delivers on that promise and that expectation. And they do so in a very powerful way. But then when we think about what drives it in this period and the importance of the context, is these are also segments that have contextual tailwinds, right? So if I'm a value-oriented retailer like discounted dollar or off-price apparel, the fact that the economic situation is slightly more challenged gives me an added boost. It means that my message resonates a little bit more than it would have otherwise. But even more than that, a lot of these brands also have a real understanding of what the consumer expects from a retailer and the type of flexibility they expect. And what's interesting is I'm very careful to say the type of flexibility, because in some cases you look at like a Lululemon or a Nike, and they have locations that are all about brand, and they have locations that are all about experience and engagement and creating a relationship. And they have locations that are very much focused on transactions. But then I think about like off-price retail. Their locations are very much built on delivering a single unified experience that you come to expect. It's not the most convenience oriented. It's not the most flashy from an engagement perspective, but it delivers on the promise. And these are brands that really understand, what does their customer expect from them? What do they need to bring to delight their customer? And they don't do things for the sake of doing them. They do things for the sake of delivering on that promise. And that's why they find such success over such an extended period of time.
Yeah, I think the expectations for sure are something that the consumer thinks about when they walk in. What experience am I going to get? And did the brand deliver on that? So thank you. So you bring up these top performers. We know that another top performer in media this year was certainly the category of retail media. That was a huge topic in 2023. Really, how do you gauge the progress that retail media made over the past year, but really thinking about it in the lens of physical stores, and what do you expect in 2024?
So, I mean, I expect a lot. I think when we talk about retail media, we still, and we should be oriented toward how it started, right? So I go to Amazon.com, I type in rice cooker, it shows me 6 variations of rice cooker or an ad for rice cooker on the side. And maybe at best, it shows me a bag of rice, right? It's very competitor specific or very adjacent product. And that's great. That is really effective for an online experience that is mission driven. I go online to buy a product, to get it, and to get it quickly. I have a visit duration of about a minute and a half on average when I go to an Amazon.com or Walmart.com. So it's very focused on speed and being to the point with the consumer. But the physical store is very different than that. The physical store is about discovery. It's about experience. It's about finding things. It's about taking advantage of the fact that when I come to a location, I'm not there for 90 seconds. I'm there for 30, 40 minutes in some cases. And I'm open to being pulled into new things. So the excitement about retail media is excitement from 2 areas. One, it's the idea that it's this high margin profit center for retailers, but all the more that is something that's powerful for the retailers to help embrace and guide discovery. And that's important because it tells us that there are ways that retail media can develop in the physical store that can be better than how it kicked off online. And we all know that like online advertising isn't always the most nuanced and gentle and customer journey delightful, right? It doesn't have to be that way, and it certainly shouldn't be that way in the store. In the store, because we're focused on discovery, because we're focused on enhancing the journey within a location, the advertising experience needs to be more subtle. It needs to be more engaging. It needs to help guide me through a process that will help me find the products that I love. And in many cases, I engage with products that I wouldn't have thought to engage with otherwise. And so it means we need to make it embedded within an effective process. We need to make it interesting and experiential. We need to make it revolving around brick and mortar. And by that, I mean, so much of the conversation of retail media and physical has been, hey, people will pull out their phones, look at a QR code, and then they'll have this experience. This is, in my mind, very silly because it takes all of the advantages of brick and mortar and it throws them out the window to pull you into a digital environment. Is there a value in having an experience that says, after I leave the store, here's a way to engage digitally? Of course, it's brilliant. Before I get there, of course. But while I'm in the store, let's take advantage of what the physical experience offers and the advantages it brings to the table. And so for so much of this space, that continued evolution around these core goals and those boundaries of what we want it to be versus how do we ensure that it doesn't become annoying is very, very important. And I will use, and this is, I think, no one's covered this better than Insider and eMarketer, but these stages, that first stage of online, clearly that's a big deal. It's established, it's growing. The physical store is still in that early first mover position. We're talking about digital screens and signage, but it's that next wave. It's the experiences, it's the promotions, it's the store in stores. That's where we're going to see the real power of retail media unlocked and the targeting that will be enabled to start thinking differently of how I bring the right messages, the right products, and the right experiences to the right places.
That's fantastic to hear. I think you always make me think about, following our conversations, what I actually should be looking for now in store and like what I will see and what type of experience I want actually from the store. So keeping people inside the store with that messaging versus having it be on the phone while they're in store. Really, really interesting points. And thinking about some of the surprises, I see, the top of your slide, what's the prize now? Placer talks often about theaters. We had a few years where people really were not going to movie theaters, but there was a huge rebound in 2023. I know you and I both talked about seeing both the Eras Tour movie and the Barbie movie with our daughters this past year. So do you anticipate that the success of theaters will continue, and how could this impact advertising?
So this is a really important. I mean, I love this topic, and I think we love this topic selfishly because at the end of last year, we were very bullish on movie theaters, and I think it proved out. I think it's not going to be as good of a year this year, and a lot of it is content. Last year saw this amazing, consistent spread of content, and it saw the power of movie theaters to serve as a center point of a wider experience. So talking about the Barbie movie, you went and you bought the necessary items and made sure you had the pink shirt, perhaps even the pink hat. You made sure you had the meal before or after that had some sort of Barbie theme. So you went to the ice cream place that was partnering to have the whatever Barbie flavor they were launching. And that was unbelievably exciting. But what comes up and becomes very, very clear here is that the movie theater is a conduit to content. And so there's two things that are really necessary to the success. The first is content. We need the right things to be in the theater to get us off of our couch to come. And there's going to be a bit of a slowdown this year. And I think even if there wasn't a slowdown, it probably wouldn't hit the peak of 2023 just because of the unique content that came out this year. But there is a content evolution that needs to take place. How do we get it so that at an AMC theater, you take advantage of what it is to watch with dozens of other people, things that you want to watch with dozens of other people? So there's lots of movies that I would rather watch on Netflix in my home. But there are lots of things that I would rather watch with a crowd, a basketball playoff game, a football game in the middle of the season that I can't travel to. I want to watch it with a crowd. And that opportunity to evolve is really significant. But there's also the experience question. How does it get up leveled? Because it's not enough to have a seat and popcorn. You need to have this upgraded experience that says, I go to the theater because what I'm going to consume there is special, it's different, and it's bigger. So it's not just the content's critical, it's the experience too. And I think what we're going to see is more immersive, more extended experiences around theaters. The food I consume there, the caliber of the seats, the caliber of the experience, and this upgraded experience, widened content could mean that even if 2024 sees slightly less than what we saw in 2023 for this segment, it still could be a foundation for a far better future for a space that many were very quick to write off just a few years ago.
All right. Well, interesting to hear that perspective. It's interesting to think about elevating that experience within the theater, even just the enhanced seats. At least to me, maybe I have low expectations, but that's been a welcome change. So I'm excited to see what's next with movie theaters. You talked about watching with a crowd. So what's the opportunity for stadiums from a retail perspective and also an advertising perspective? Is that something being maximized right now?
So I think it's a huge no, right? Stadiums are. Let's use the Taylor Swift example. When that concert tour launched, we looked at data from the concerts, and we assumed there was an issue with our data because there were way too many people at the stadium. So a stadium that could fit 60,000 people or could fill 60,000 tickets was seeing 100,000 people at the stadium. And like, this doesn't make sense. And we called people on the ground to say, is what we're seeing wrong? And they were like, no, there was massive tailgating for many people who never found their way into the stadium for that concert. And while that's not necessarily a classic concert behavior, it is a classic sporting events behavior. And what you see when you go to these events is so much opportunity that is not taken advantage of that it kind of makes your head explode. Because when we think of the 3 to 4 hours before a football game that someone comes in and the lack of food options outside of the stadium, there's a massive opportunity.
Wow.
When we think of the types of engagement we have with our sports teams and the limited number or type of brands that are engaging with us in those environments, Football, it tends to be trucks, banks, beer, and I don't even know what else. Maybe fast food. And it's not enough. I'll give you an example from a past life of mine. We worked with a company that was an early competitor to Instagram, and they wanted to launch a photo booth in a stadium. And they asked to charge by the number of people. They would pay by the number of people who use the photo booth. It would be free. The stadium didn't know how to deal with it. Yet the amount of impressions they would have brought, the amount of engagement they would have brought, would have made this a far more valuable partnership to them than many of their others, and a more sensible partnership for this brand who wanted to be in this environment. And we think even more about the emotional connection. I love my favorite sports team to a ridiculous extent. It is maybe the only thing as a adult in my late 30s that I love that has no real impact on my life in any way, shape, or form. Yet I have that passion. And the fact that brands will associate with that thing that I love means my passion spreads. So I don't necessarily love Hard Rock, but the fact that they sponsor my team stadium gives me a very positive relationship with them. I think the more brands and advertisers recognize how powerful this opportunity is, how untapped it is for its full potential, and the type of relationship you can develop with very significant audiences, the more they will lean into the opportunity that exists within those spaces.
Absolutely. And we're seeing, so many of these major events draw huge star power. They're, as you said, drawing the tailgating versus even getting a ticket to that event. But they've also really been inspiring retail and have driven a significant attention to that channel. So how important are these interactions with these major events? And will we see more of these in 2024?
So I think the answer is yes. I think what's interesting is we're going to see two types. We're going to see, or two types of engagement. We're going to see planned engagement and opportunistic engagement. So planned engagement would be AMC working with Taylor Swift to kind of exclusively launch her Eras movie. Planned engagement would be, again, your favorite ice cream store, clothing store, turning everything pink. Event halls creating these pink out themes, malls, etc. Knowing that it's coming and engaging with the brand and having something tailored and prepared beforehand. Opportunistic says, I'm going to take advantage even if it's not about me. So if I don't necessarily have, a direct relationship with Barbie, I might have a Barbie theme at my restaurant where I'm going to have, I don't know, a certain type of food that resonates with that audience and feels Barbie-ish. I might have a pink ice cream for dessert. I might have something. I might tap into the fact that people are going, and when they go, it's an experience and an event. So when we took our daughters to that movie, it was more than just a movie visit like another one would have been. So our likelihood to go out to dinner before or after, go to ice cream before or after, extend that trip because it's an exciting experience is much larger. And the brands that are aware of the opportunity that's going to land on their doorstep, if I sit near a movie theater, I better be aware that this is happening and what the mood is and what the perspective is. And it's not just Barbie. I think it was the Harry Potter movie that had, people coming up dressed up. All of these elements bring so much potential value. And it really asks, do you understand what's happening around you? And do you recognize that there are opportunities happening on a fairly regular basis that you can tap into if you're aware and just a little bit creative?
All right. Well, let's now shift gears, talk about pop-up shops. I'm seeing a ton of these here in New York City. Of course, it's the holiday time. So these types of short-term retail concepts and other types of pop-up stores, they've been picking up steam. What's the value that they bring, whether it's to advertisers or retail or even the companies that utilize those?
So I think we start with that kind of, we talked about this in the retail media bit a little bit. We said, what's the value of a physical experience? It's brand. It's the fact that I can engage, touch and feel a product. I can kind of fall in love with a brand by having an experience. And what pop-ups give us the ability to do is push those buttons without long-term commitment. So you can create something that's immersive. You can create something that's about a long-term relationship. And you can create something that is focused on the right time period. So you optimize the chances of success. And what's amazing here is that it's such a valuable enterprise because it helps everybody. For the consumer, it's something interesting, different, and new. And if it develops, if I already have a pre-existing relationship with a brand, it deepens it. If I don't, it gives me the ability to poke around and see if I want to have that relationship. For the retailer, it gives them something interesting and exciting that's different. It gives them the ability to lean into the creativity, not be as focused on the transaction in the short term, be much more focused on this almost immersive advertising experience that also has a transaction component. But it's also for the shopping centers and the malls that it has value, these areas that host them. And it could be a main street in a city, it could be a stadium, it could be a shopping center. But these elements don't just drive crowds to the one store. If I've already left my house, gotten in the car, driven to this place, am I more likelihood to continue on my journey at the adjacent retailers or food places? 100% yes. So there's this really powerful win-win-win element that we love. And I think it's that ability to test, play, get creative, and deliver something that doesn't have to sit within the narrow standards of what we need a store to deliver, which is not overly oriented, but heavily oriented towards transactions and sales.
You're getting me thinking about this summer when the Barbie Cafe was a pop-up location here in New York City, down in South Street Seaport, which is another space here in the city that obviously it's outdoors. It's been reimagined in recent years. It's completely different. That drew a huge crowd. It even drew me down there. So it wasn't just about going to that one location, as you said, but it was about the experience of everything around it. And thinking about reimagining public spaces, that actually brings us nicely to our next topic on placemaking, and thinking about just different ways that these public spaces can be thought about differently. What does this mean in the wider retail concept, and how important is this for advertisers?
So I think it's really important. And let's almost take a step back to take a step forward. If we think about what we meant with pop-ups, let's imagine I launch a pop-up for this cool retail concept that Marissa, you and I came up with together. I don't know what it is, but let's just go with it. And it's really exciting. And essentially, we don't view it as a store, and we don't view it as like an advertisement. We view it as some hybrid, right? It's like an advertisement that sells product in the space. What it does is it creates an experience that's interesting, drives urgency, and potentially extends the amount of time someone spends within a retail space. That's the entire idea of placemaking. Placemaking is asking, what can I do within an area to increase the likelihood that you will come, increase the likelihood that you will stay, and that you will have a positive experience that leads to more sales and more transactions in the short and long term. So let's take a simple example. I go to the mall to get some work done. I need to get something at the Apple store, and I have my backpack on. I'm going to go right to the office, and I'm waiting in the Apple store, and I see that there's this really nice sitting area. There's good Wi-Fi, and the nice sitting area has this cool coffee truck, pop-up thing that's right there. And so I go grab a coffee, and I get an hour's worth of work done. And then as I'm leaving, I'm like, you know what? I'll go grab lunch from that place. And I remembered I need to get that product that I needed for my holiday gift shopping. So I pop into a store, then I go about my day. That's the idea of placemaking. How do I increase my chances of succeeding? By increasing the time you want to spend there. So take an even sillier example. When I put EV charging stations in a parking lot for a shopping center in California, it's not just because that's a value to the consumer. It's not just because that has advertising space that I can leverage. It's also because if I have to come and charge my car for 20, 30, 40 minutes, my likelihood to leave my car and go do something in that center is higher. We looked at 7-Elevens that were next to car washes and ones that weren't, and they do much better. Why? Because I have time to kill. So that pop in to get a Slurpee or a drink or some food is increased dramatically. And that's what we think about when we think about placemaking. And this is important for shopping center owners and mall owners. And it's important for retailers. And it's really important for advertisers. Because when we think about retail media, we think about media opportunities within retail spaces. We want to be in the spaces where people want to spend time, not just where they go, but where they want to spend time. And that's where there's going to be this much larger opportunity. And that's why advertising is going to get more immersive and more focused on enhancing these placemaking opportunities, because it creates that win-win between the customer, the retailer, the shopping center owner, and the advertiser as well.
All right, thank you for that. Let's now move into the overall topic of value. Value was something that was really apparent in 2023. Of course, when there's changes in the economy, consumers tend to focus on value. Will that be a primary issue in 2024? And if so, who's going to benefit from it?
Our thinking is yes. It's very hard to assume that the economic situation is going to magically become amazing on January 1st. More likely, we're going to see an extension of it at least in the first half of next year, but potentially even longer. And therefore, the pursuit of value will matter. But value is not cheap. Those two things don't mean the same thing. Cheap means inexpensive, and that's great. There's a lot of things where inexpensive might be the most important thing we consider. But value is about, I consider something worth X, and I can buy it for Y, which is much lower than X. That's the gap. That delta is value. And this is what's so interesting about the secondhand retail space, because it means two things at the same time. And I'm stealing this idea from Billy Taubman. I want to be clear, this is not something smart that I thought of. I'm absolutely stealing it from him. He was a guest on one of our webinars, and he had this comment that I loved. If I go to buy $1,000 dress, that's an expensive dress. But if I feel very confident that I can sell said dress for $800, it's no longer an $1,000 dress, it's a $200 dress. And that's the shift in mindset. And that's the reason value is so much more interesting than cheap. Some people need to cut costs. Some people are looking to maximize costs. Maximizing costs means, how do I find things where are they the most valuable, where I get that value? How do I find affordable luxuries? So, okay, I'm not going to buy a new couch this year, but I'm still going to splurge an extra $1 or $2 on coffee, because that's an affordable luxury that makes me feel good on a day-to-day basis. And so when we think about value, we need to think about the way we communicate it, to whom we're trying to communicate it. So, for example, I think we make a mistake sometimes of saying something like, the economic situation is challenging, and therefore consumers are pursuing value. But there are many consumers who are fine in their financial situation. Maybe they have a little bit less in the bank account than they did before, but they're still doing great. And their spending patterns are not going to change dramatically. We have others who are going to look to, maximize the dollars that they spend. We have others that are going to look to trade down on certain items, and others that look to trade down on everything to really keep their costs low. But understanding who I'm trying to reach as a brand, understanding what an economic situation means for their thinking and their behaviors and patterns is what's going to go a long way in allowing me to deliver the right messages, galvanize that audience, show that I understand what they're going through, and then ultimately drive transactions and sales in the best possible way. And so it really is an advertising and marketing question as much as it is a consumer behavior question.
Yeah, that behavior is really interesting to think about. What do you think about this? I mean, as more behavior changes, it seems like a lot of behavior is mirroring what we know from before the pandemic started. So how much do you think has really changed, and what do you think is going to revert back?
So, I mean, this is so interesting to me, because I think when we look back on the pandemic and we say, what changed in retail as a result? I think we're going to talk about a few things. I think we're going to talk about the fact that it reinforced our appreciation for all things brick and mortar. And that could be out of home advertising, and it could be in-store shopping, because it should have been the death knell and it wasn't. I think we're going to talk about essential retail and things like the pull forward of demand in those sectors that had these short-term surges of engagement. But I think for the most part, the biggest thing we're going to say that changed was hybrid work. We're going to say that work changed forever. It didn't change that we never went to the office again. And it didn't change that we don't need the office anymore. But that office work lost a little bit of its visit share than what it had before. And what I think is really interesting is as we see that revert back closer and closer, so instead of being 40% of the time we're in the office, it's 50, 60, 70%. It means that a lot of the behaviors that changed as a result are starting to revert back. So that morning visit to a grocery store on Monday is going back to being a Tuesday evening visit. And this is a really important thing for brands and advertisers. If I'm a retailer or a brand who benefited from this behavior, I need to be incentivizing that customer to keep on doing it. And so let's take an example not from here. Let's stick into the holidays for a second. I am a panicky person. I worry that the thing I want, I will not get in time for the holidays. So I want to shop early. I have my list done quick early. I want to get the products early. I want to give myself a buffer, and it makes me happy. So when a brand like Target or Walmart says, our shopping season is starting already in October, I am all in. But I don't know if this is you, Marissa, but let's pretend it is. You just want the Black Friday crazy experience. That's what you want. You want the doorbusters. You want the madness. You do not want to go shopping early. You want to be part of the hullabaloo. So that messaging is going to work for you. And then there's other people who want to play chicken with the retailers and wait for that cheapest possible price. And they will wait until 2 days before Christmas. Did you get those last minute items? Because they feel like they can get a better deal. And what it means is we need to market towards our entire audience. And we need to have messaging that resonates with different components. And that means understanding in our loyalty programs, what are my behaviors versus your behaviors so that I can incentivize the right things for each person. But it also means, even in broad strokes, knowing how to communicate those things based on the location or time of year. So the person who's going to wait for Black Friday, come hell or high water, isn't going to be turned off by the fact that you say, come get shopping done early, even though I will be very excited by it. And that nuanced understanding of the calendar, how things are changing, how the consumer's life is changing, and therefore how I need to message them as a result is so important. I think an example of a place where we saw this done very effectively was convenience stores. Convenience stores should have been rocked by hybrid work. Let's think about what hybrid work meant. We got in our cars less, we drove to offices less, and convenience stores are usually situated in urban environments, next to gas stations, or for quick purchases when I'm on my way to doing something else. If I'm at home in the suburbs, I don't need the convenience store as much as I did before. I'm commuting less. Yet they did extremely well. Why? Because they got creative. They thought about what they are. They had QSR-ish items. They recognize that if I'm commuting less, that doesn't mean I'm in the car less, because maybe I'm not taking the bus as often. They recognize that there's other ways to draw me in, whether it's car washes or EV stations or whatever it might be. And they were able to lean into that process to drive value. So that creativity, that ability to understand what a situation is, what my customer needs, and how I can fill gaps for my customer is such a significant piece.
Well, beyond some of those stores that got creative in the city, you mentioned being in the suburbs. How much of a boost did we see from suburban retail?
Absolutely. I think the suburbs saw a boost. Why? And this isn't a crazy idea. You and I have talked about this quite a bit before. People were living in an apartment in the city with 2 or 3 kids, and they were like, oh my God, we have no space, but we love the city. And then the pandemic happened, and they couldn't do anything. And they were like, all right, that's it. We got to go. And they went to Connecticut. And sometimes they went to Austin or Tampa, but they would usually went to the surrounding areas. And they found that the suburbs were exciting. But what this meant was that audiences moved. So one of the questions we get very often is, we see closures of retailers in cities. Is this because the city is dying? No, not even a little bit. It's because audiences are moving. So if you are a retailer that is targeting that millennial who's got a handful of kids, who has some more disposable income, and you had to have this tight filled space in Manhattan because the real estate's so expensive there, you don't need that space anymore, because I don't live in New York anymore. I live in the suburbs. But if you're a retailer that's targeting Gen Z or whatever comes after Gen Z or after that, you can come back to the city because those younger people are coming back. Or maybe you're targeting an older audience that's moving back to the city because they don't need the big space anymore and they want a slightly more interesting day to day. And so, what it asks retailers to do is say, where is my audience? What do they want? And how do I deliver that for them? And that means the promotions and the marketing. And that means where I have my stores, where I potentially have my pop-ups, where I have my engagement, and what do I want to accomplish in certain areas based on what I know about my audience in those areas.
Well, I hope some of those stores stay in the city because I have yet to flee to the suburbs. So I hope that all of my stores don't just go leaving Manhattan at this point. But I guess I'll also have to shop at some of the Gen Z focused places as well. All right. Well, let's talk about grocery. That's been a really interesting category. That's maintained a lot of the momentum in its visit share. Why does this matter for advertisers? And what are you seeing with grocery in 2024?
So I think it first of all matters because if there's anyone who's carrying the retail media torch, it's grocery. And they're doing a lot with non-endemic advertising. That is going to happen. It's going to become endemic. And it's going to become this strange area in between classic category management and retail media. But it is an exciting area. And it's important to know that this is a segment that 4 or 5 years ago, the narrative was QSR is taking wallet share, restaurants are taking wallet share, superstores like Target and Walmart are taking wallet share, discount is taking wallet share. They're great, they're important, but they're just not as important. And yet, they had gains in the pandemic that they've yet to really lose. And they've held on to their visit share, even in the face of rapid expansions. And while that might dissipate a little bit, what we have seen is that there is a central role to the grocery store that we didn't necessarily appreciate. It is a part of the retail journey that we didn't necessarily give it credit for. And more importantly, perhaps, the consumer likes it. Our perception that everything was about convenience and that we hate going to the grocery store. And if we can just sit on our couches for the rest of our lives and have food, funneled into our gullets, we would do it. It's not true. We want to go. We want to peruse the aisles. We want to pick our vegetables. We want to think about what we're going to have for dinner that week. We want to choose which of the 8 billion variations of Captain Crunch we want. And all of that is a journey and an experience. And for advertisers, it should make you very excited that you can do interesting things in a store that can galvanize your audience. And even more, that you can target these locations. So I can look at Publix, for example, and say, ooh, this is so great. It helps me tackle Florida. Or I could say, can I segment Publix locations in Florida to see which ones are most over-indexed for college football fans? Because I know Florida State has a game coming up, and I want to lean into that as hard as I can for 2 weeks because I represent Tostitos, and I don't know, they're in the Tostitos Bowl, and I want to have this immersive experience. Try our new chip. Which chip do you want for your pregame? And then get that going in all those locations. There is so much creativity that can be triggered from this type of understanding and this type of targeting. And I think the marketing advertising opportunity in retail media is exciting, but a big reason that it's so exciting is because grocery is exciting.
All right. Well, we have one more topic today. We're talking about The Office before we get into the Q&A. So just a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions, please let us know. It's been so interesting to watch The Office. I'm somebody who comes in every day. I have friends who go in half the week. I have some friends who never go in. So what really is the new normal? And what does this mean for specifically consumer-oriented companies?
So I think the answer is it's probably the new normal. So I think that 70 to 80% range, 3 to 4 days on average being kind of the norm should be the expectation. And that expectation should be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are hectic, Monday, Friday are lighter, and either probably Monday as opposed to Friday. Friday's going to be pretty dead. Monday's going to be more dead than Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but it'll be more alive than Friday. I think that's the expectation we should have. What it means for retailers and restaurants and advertisers is I need to adapt accordingly. So if I am a restaurant in a business district that relies on that traffic, I better know what I'm doing on Fridays because I'm probably not going to have the same level of visits. I need to adjust my staffing. I might want to have a delivery option for people. I might want to have a catering option that can bring in salads to workplaces nearby. I need to get creative. If I'm an advertiser, I want to think about what does that mean for the routes people take, for the lives they live. We talked about this a bit, in the past, but one of my favorite things about what hybrid means is that it creates a new mode of operating, which is we're not weekend, weekday. We're weekday from the office, and weekday from home. Because if you want to communicate me on a weekday from home, I might be dressed more casually. I'm wearing a button-down shirt on top, but maybe it's comfortable sweatpants underneath, right? Whereas when I go into the office, the likelihood that it is more, head to toe reflective of what I should be wearing is higher. And
100%.
understanding that difference in mentality shift, what it means for me as the consumer, how my life changed, how my spending changes, where I'm going as a result, what I can do with my free time, how my day ends. So when we commute, our day doesn't end at 5 o'clock or whenever we leave the office. It ends when we get home. If I'm working from home, my day ends when I close my computer. So these changes are very significant. And I think they're going to have a big impact on the way we engage with retail products and advertising.
All right. Great points there. Ethan, always so much fun having a conversation with you. And thanks so much for our audience for engaging with us today in the chat. So Ethan, I have a few questions for you. The first one is, what role will convenience play for retail in the coming year? I know you talked about convenience stores, but let's talk about the overall topic of convenience.
Yeah, so I said this once. I was asked to have a bold take in a podcast. And I said it. And once I said it, I was like, oh, I think you go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. And for me, it's that convenience is the most overrated thing for consumers. Very critically, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying it's overrated. And by overrated, I mean, we have built so many perspectives around the idea that the consumer wants to get in and get out as fast as possible. They want to do as little work as possible. And in some cases, that's true. Online, every click I need to take reduces my likelihood of converting. But I don't think convenience is the most important thing for us. I think we have all made the decision to drive 5 to 10 to 15 minutes further to go to the good Walmart or the good Target as opposed to the one that's closer to our house. I think we've all made the decision to go to the grocery store because we want to pick out our items and think about what it is. We want to pick out our vegetables because they're the specific way I like my apples that they don't always give it to me when I do delivery. And so this idea that I'm less about convenience than expected, and I'm more about brand engagement, more about loving the product and being enthralled with the product and being delighted by a retail experience than I am about having things be as quick and easy as possible is very important. Again, this doesn't mean your process should be a mess and it should be inconvenient and difficult for the consumer, but it means we should be optimizing for experience. We should be optimizing for product quality and experience quality, not just speed and the fastest in and out.
Okay, Ethan. So I have a question for you that came in regards to our last topic, which was the office, and an always popular topic. So can you give an example of how the shifts in office visits might impact consumer purchasing behavior? For example, you said if their day now ends when they close the laptop, how might this impact their shopping?
If I go home if I leave the office at 5:30 and I live in New Jersey and I need to leave New York and get home, it's going to take me an hour if I'm lucky. And I'm going to be tired and I'm going to be a little bit cranky. And then I realize I need to go to the supermarket. So I get in my car and I can't be bothered. And I hate it. And I'm tired and I'm cranky. And I'm thinking about the fact that I just want to be in my pajamas and be done. So when I go to the grocery store, it is circle the outside of the store, get the milk, get the things I need. I forgot 3 things on the list. I didn't think a lot about it when I drew my list, and I'm gone. Let's say I didn't go into the office on Monday. My day starts at 9, and I decide to be a little bit cheeky. Started at 9:30. So at 8:30, I get in my car. I drive 5 minutes to my local grocery store. And I sat there in the morning and I thought about what I want to get. And because I have some time to kill, I walk leisurely through the aisles and I think about what I want to make for dinner that week. And I don't feel the same level of stress or that same like, oh, I can't be bothered. I don't want to cook. Fine, I'll just order McDonald's. Well, how does that change my behavior? How does that change my shop? You know, the idea of like, you shouldn't go to the supermarket when you're hungry because you buy too much. The grocer wants me to go to the supermarket when I'm in a level place. I'm a place that's optimized for purchasing, not optimized for get me out of here mode. So that has a big impact. But let's follow this through. I went to the grocery store on Monday morning and I did the trip properly, got all the things I needed. So on Saturday, when I would otherwise have to pop over to the grocery store to get the 6 things I forgot, I don't need to go. I get an hour back on my weekend. Am I more likely to go to the mall? Am I more likely to go to, I don't know, a movie with my kids? Am I more likely to go out for brunch with my wife? Maybe. And I think that is the type of change that we're thinking about when I get time back and I remove stress. And I think there's forget spend on like gas, but I think just the human emotional components change who I am as a consumer.
All right. So thank you for that. No, I think we can all empathize with going to the store when you're in a bad mood or when you're hungry and what your list looks like or what your cart looks like versus when you're in a good mindset and your list is all cleaned up and nice. Yeah, I think I didn't like that experience of taking the train home and I felt stressed even thinking about it. So hopefully I won't have that experience today. All right. So Ethan, our audience has been so great. They've actually been sending in some ideas in the chat, based on some of your content earlier. So I wanted to read some of these ideas to you and see what you think. This was around the time when you were talking about theaters and stadiums and also the malls. So one of our viewers says, I think influencers need to start walking through the malls and becoming living models for the brands. What do you think about that for some promotion?
Yeah, 100%. My son is 8 years old. He watches football, basketball, and Mr. Beast. Right? That's what he loves. And there was some guy from the Mr. Beast extended family that went to like 5 football games in a day. And he was like, this is the coolest thing. And this is where he went in that stadium. And it has such a huge impact. So I agree completely. We need to think about our spaces for all the value. And it could be a stage as much as it could be a place to promote and drive sales. 100% agree.
All right. All right. We are going to, I'm going to share one more comment with you before we close today. So another viewer says, so instead of having still images of someone jogging through the park, wearing Nike or another athleisure brand, it would be cool to have 3 friends walking through the malls with beautiful Nike outfits, meeting and interacting with customers and showing where you can buy these outfits, leading somebody to the store, maybe.
I mean, I feel like your audience needs to be in marketing. I think, yes, like all of these ideas are good because all of these ideas tap into the concept that I am influenced by the things around me. And yes, a really well done billboard does resonate a message. A message does get through. But the engagement I have with the people around me has so much more of an impact. So if you guys, I mean, let's imagine we're Nike. If I was Nike and I could say, all right, I know who Ethan's favorite athlete is, and that's going to be my brand sponsor. And I know what color shoes Ethan likes more and what shirts he likes best. And I can put them on his best friends. So he's like, oh man, that's cool. I wish I had that. Wouldn't they do that? Of course. And so you're talking about a scalable way of doing that. And I think it's brilliant. And we want to see brands get more creative, get more interested. And I think part of it is just, a lot, I think, is the effort. I think we forget that like you ever get mad at a brand because they do something you don't like? And then you realize like, I'm getting mad at a company of like 10,000 people. Like, but that's how we feel. It's an emotional engagement. So if a brand shows me that they're making effort for me and they're trying to get things to me and they're not just doing the lowest common denominator of advertising, I appreciate it. I care. I'm excited by it. Even if I don't love it, by the way, I still can appreciate the effort. And I think so much of what retailers and the brands that are selling to retailers and the brands that are retailers themselves need to kind of embrace as fully as possible is that you can do it all. You just need to figure out the right approaches to each. And it doesn't have to be that crazy expensive. So there's very effective ways and very vision goal oriented ways to check all of these boxes And I think you're seeing more retailers do it. And that's why, in my mind, brick and mortar retail and brick and mortar advertising is in not a good place post-pandemic, but it's enjoying a true renaissance post-pandemic of what we expect, how we engage with it, and what can be done with that platform in the future.
All right. Well, first, I want to just say thank you to our audience for these great questions and for the ideas that you shared. So, Ethan, I'm sure that was fun for you. Hopefully, it was to hear some of those great ideas from our audience. So, thanks for leaning in with us. And of course, Ethan, what a pleasure to have you here again. It was wonderful to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for bearing with me. It was a little bit harder to speak today, but I really appreciate it. I hope it all got through okay. Thank you so much for joining.
You sounded great, Ethan, and it was great content. So thank you so much. So before we wrap up today, I'm just going to take a moment to tell you about what's happening across eMarketer's media channels. You can register for more live analyst and Tech Talk webinars on our events page at eMarketer.com/webinars. This Friday, I will also be hosting our last Tech Talk webinar of the year. We'll be discussing mobile performance marketing trends, and I hope you can join just to close out the year together. And finally, don't forget to check out our newsletters and our daily podcast called Behind the Numbers. Thank you all for your time, and thanks again to Ethan, the team at Placer.ai, and our Studio II crew, which is our production team behind the scenes, for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.